It all began with a phone call that shattered the quiet of a December evening. One of those calls that instantly sinks into your bones and refuses to let go. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one by the fireplace in our living room, wrapped in a thick woolen blanket. The fire was crackling, casting a warm orange glow across the room, and Linda's old jazz records were playing softly in the background. It was supposed to be a calm night, just me, my wife, and the peaceful stillness that winter always seems to bring. But I had this nagging feeling I couldn't shake. Something felt off. Linda had been a little quieter than usual today, more withdrawn. She'd complained of a headache earlier, but it wasn't anything serious. Or so I thought. I remember catching her gazing out the window more than once, lost in thought. And when I asked if she was all right, she just smiled weakly and told me to stop fussing. I guess that's the way she always was, never one to make a fuss or worry us unnecessarily. That night, I was sipping a cup of black coffee, watching the flames dance in the fireplace, when the phone rang. The sudden shrill ring broke the silence like a clap of thunder. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer immediately. I snatched up the receiver, and before I could even say, "Hello?" Michael's voice was on the other end, sharp, urgent, trembling with panic. "Dad, you've got to come. It's Mom. She's real bad. The doctors say she might not make it through the night." His words hit me like a freight train. I sat there frozen, the mug slipping from my fingers and shattering on the floor. My mind refused to grasp what I was hearing. Where are you?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What hospital? What happened?" "Dad, she's in the hospital in Jefferson," Emily cut in, her voice barely holding back tears. "They said she's unstable. You need to come now, please. She won't make it otherwise." The world around me blurred for a moment. The cozy warmth of the living room, the crackling fire, the peacefulness, all of it vanished. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. My breath caught in my throat, and my hands trembled uncontrollably. I felt the cold bite of dread creep in, filling every corner of my being. Without thinking twice, I leapt to my feet, grabbing my heavy winter coat and boots from the closet. I didn't stop to call Linda or pack a bag. All that mattered was getting to her. I stuffed my phone into my pocket, still buzzing with texts from Michael and Emily. Updates about her condition, their scared voices pleading for me to hurry. Outside, the night had turned bitterly cold. The first snowflakes were beginning to fall, small, soft, and ghostly white against the black sky. I could see my breath steaming in the cold air as I slammed the car door shut and started the engine. The heater kicked on, but it did little to chase away the chill that was settling deep inside me. The highway stretched ahead like a vast, icy river disappearing into the dark. The snow had started to fall harder now, thick flakes swirling in the headlights, creating a white haze that blurred the road. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, eyes straining to see through the storm. Every mile felt endless, and every passing car seemed like a reminder that I was alone in this. The radio crackled with weather warnings, blizzard conditions, icy roads, travel advisories, but I barely heard a word. My mind was a whirlwind of fear, worry, and disbelief. I kept picturing Linda's face, pale and fragile, lying in a hospital bed, fighting for breath. The thought tore at my heart, and I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. I thought back to all the Christmases we'd shared at that old country house, the laughter, the warmth, the smells of pine and fresh-baked cookies filling the kitchen. Linda was always the heart of those gatherings, lighting up every room she entered. Now, the idea that she might be gone before I even got to see her was unbearable. Several times, I pulled over to the side of the road, exhausted and shaking. I'd sit in the car with the heater blasting, clutching the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. My fingers were numb, despite the gloves, and my legs ached from the long drive. But every time, I told myself, I had to keep going. Stopping was not an option. Michael kept texting me updates. "She's stable for now, but it's touch and go," one message read. Another said, "The doctors don't know how long she has." Each message felt like a fresh stab. I tried to reply, but my hands were too shaky to type. Instead, I muttered prayers under my breath, hoping against hope. The roads grew treacherous as the storm worsened. Snow drifted across the highway in thick waves, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. I slowed down, driving with my hazards blinking, eyes darting back and forth. The wind howled outside, rattling the car like a wild animal, but inside, I was a fortress of desperation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the turnoff for the country house. The road was barely visible, covered in snow, and the driveway was a tunnel of white. I felt my stomach twist with a mix of relief and anxiety as I pulled up to the house, our house, the place where so many memories were made. But when I got out of the car and looked up at the windows, my heart sank. The curtains were drawn tight, the porch light was off. The house was deathly quiet, cold and lifeless like a tomb. No sign of Linda, no sign of the kids. I called out her name into the frigid air, my voice trembling. "Linda, are you here?" Only silence answered back. The moment I finally rolled into the driveway of that old country house, Linda's family's place, the one we'd shared so many memories in, everything inside me shifted. I'd been driving for nearly 8 hours straight, fighting through a fierce winter storm that clawed at the windshield and forced me to crawl along ice-coated roads like a man on a mission. The snow was relentless, falling thick and fast, turning the world outside into a white blur. I hadn't stopped, not once, because the urgency in my children's voices still echoed in my ears. "Drive now, Dad. Mom won't make it through the night if you don't get here." And yet, as I stood there outside the house, the air so cold it bit at my cheeks, my heart sank deeper with every breath. The place looked frozen in time, but not in that peaceful, wintry way I'd imagined. No warmth, no welcoming light spilling from the windows. Just cold silence. I pulled the heavy brass key from my coat pocket, the same key Linda had given me years ago when we first took over the house, and felt the familiar weight in my hand. It was a small comfort, a tether to the life I thought I was returning to. But when the door creaked open, I was hit by the stale stillness that filled the halls, a silence so deep it almost felt like the house itself was holding its breath. No sounds of life, no familiar creak of floorboards, no soft hum of the furnace. The air was stale, smelling faintly of pine from the Christmas wreath hanging on the front door, and a hint of cold that seeped in through the cracked window panes. I called out for Linda, softly at first, then louder, my voice cracking from the mix of exhaustion and worry. "Linda, honey, it's me. I'm here." Only the echo of my own voice came back to me, bouncing off the empty walls. I moved through the room slowly, almost cautiously, as if expecting her to appear any moment. The living room was untouched, no sign that anyone had been there in days. The Christmas tree sat in the corner, its lights off, ornaments dusty and unmoved. The couch cushions were fluffed neatly, and the fireplace was cold and bare of ashes. Nothing out of place except for the overwhelming absence of my wife. I found the kitchen table set for a meal, but the coffee cup left there was cold and half empty. It looked as if someone had abandoned it in a hurry, but no one was around. The windows were frosted over, blurring the world outside, and through the cracked blinds I could see no footprints in the fresh snow, except for the ones I'd left coming in. I felt a cold lump form in my throat as I wandered through the bedrooms. The master bedroom was pristine, the bed made perfectly. No sign of the hurried packing or the presence of a sick person fighting for her life. No medication bottles on the nightstand. No equipment that might indicate someone needed urgent care. Nothing to support the story I'd been told on the phone. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone again and called Michael, my eldest. His name felt strange on my lips, like calling on a stranger. He answered after a few rings, voice steady but distant. "Michael, where exactly are you all? And why didn't you meet me at the hospital like you said? I came all this way through that storm." His answer was careful, measured. "Dad, we thought it'd be better if you came here first. We just wanted to make sure everything was calm before you arrived. Mom's resting. It's nothing to worry about." But the calm in his voice didn't match the chaos inside me. I told him the house felt empty, no sign of Mom anywhere. He hesitated, then said, "She's with Aunt Sarah in the city. We didn't want to stress you out with the details." Stress? I was already driving through a blizzard because they claimed she was dying. Now they're saying she's safe, and hiding her from me? As I hung up, a deep pit formed in my stomach. The longer I stayed, the more questions swirled through my mind. Why all the secrecy? Why the empty house? Why had my children gone to such lengths to keep me away, to tell me stories that now seemed like cruel fabrications? I paced the cold wooden floors, my breath visible in the frigid air, clutching the old family photo albums to remind myself of the life I thought I was protecting. I thought about the holidays Linda and I had spent here, the laughter that used to fill these rooms. And now, it felt like I'd walked into a ghost story. Later that night, when the house was completely silent, save for the occasional groan of settling wood, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the fireplace. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been tricked. My children had used my love and concern for their mother to orchestrate something behind my back. A Christmas without me. A family gathering where my presence was not just uninvited. It was unwelcome. I stared out the window at the snow piling against the porch, my mind racing with doubts and suspicions. Had my children planned this lie from the start? Was it a way to keep me away from family decisions, from the house, from Linda? I remembered the brief texts I'd gotten over the last few weeks, vague mentions of stress and family matters, and the sudden coldness in their voices. This wasn't just about a sick wife anymore. This was about control, exclusion, and betrayal. I clenched my fists, feeling the sting of tears threatening to spill. The man who had dedicated his life to building a secure family and a legacy was now standing alone in a house filled with shadows. A man who was supposed to protect his wife, now left wondering if the people he trusted most had turned their backs on him. That cold winter night, in that empty house, I realized this Christmas was going to be the hardest one of my life, and the beginning of a battle I never expected to fight. The next morning dawned slowly, with a cold gray light filtering weakly through the heavy curtains that had been drawn tight since I arrived. I woke early, before the sun, feeling hollow and restless, the ache in my chest from yesterday's frantic drive through the storm still gnawing at me. My mind refused to settle, tormented by questions, by the silence in this house that should have been alive with my wife's presence and the warmth of family. Instead, I was met with emptiness. I sat in the worn armchair by the window, staring out at the snow-covered grounds, the frost sparkling like tiny diamonds on the barren trees. The quiet was unnatural. Not a sound of footsteps, not a murmur of voices, not even the creak of old wood settling in the cold, just the sharp whistle of the wind. My heart pounded with every passing minute. Where was Linda? My wife, my anchor, the reason I had driven through the worst storm we'd had all year, with the icy roads slick and treacherous, all because my kids told me she was so sick she might not see another dawn. But here I was, and she wasn't. I walked through the house, calling her name softly at first, then louder, but all I heard in return was the hollow echo of my own voice bouncing back from empty walls. No sign of her, no trace of anyone but me. I tried to keep my composure, but as the minutes ticked by, doubt began to creep in. Something wasn't right. The way my children avoided my eyes last night, the vague, almost rehearsed answers they gave me when I asked about her whereabouts, the closed-off curtains, the locked rooms, the way the house seemed deliberately cold and distant. Finally, I demanded to speak with Michael and Jennifer. I needed answers, and I needed them now. They came into the living room reluctantly, their faces pale and strained. I could tell they had been awake, too, because of the dark circles under their eyes and the nervous way they kept glancing at each other. But most of all, I could see the guilt. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what I feared might come next. "Michael, Jennifer," I began, my voice shaking but firm. "I need you to tell me the truth. Where's Mom? Why isn't she here? Why didn't you call me earlier if she was really that sick?" Michael looked away, biting his lip, while Jennifer fidgeted with her sleeves, avoiding my gaze. Then Jennifer finally spoke, her voice low and trembling. "Dad, it's not what you think. Mom's fine. She's not sick. She's with Aunt Sarah, resting. We didn't want you to come all this way, not in this weather." I blinked, stunned. "Not sick? Then why?" "Because," Michael interrupted, voice breaking, "we wanted to spend Christmas here, together, just us kids. We thought, maybe you wouldn't come if you thought Mom was well." The room spun for a moment. I had to sit down before I fell. "You lied," I said hoarsely. "You told me Mom was dying. You made me drive through a blizzard, risking my life, based on a lie." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't know what else to do. We thought if you were here, things would be tense. We wanted some peace." Peace. Their peace came at the cost of my trust, my love for my wife, and the sacred bond of family. I felt betrayed, crushed by the realization that the people I had raised had chosen deception over honesty. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Why make me come all this way for nothing? Why hurt me like this?" Michael's shoulders slumped, his face pale and drawn. "We thought you didn't want to be part of this anymore. You've been so busy with work, always gone, always distant. We didn't think you cared." That hit harder than I expected. Yes, work had consumed me lately, but I never stopped loving them, or Linda. And to think they believed I didn't care stung deep. I looked around at the house, at the Christmas decorations I'd imagined celebrating together, the empty chairs at the table, the cold air that seemed to seep into my bones. The illusion of family had shattered in an instant. For a long time, no one spoke. The weight of their betrayal hung thick between us like a storm cloud. My heart ached not just for the lie, but for the distance that had grown between us over the years, the unspoken words, the missed moments, the cold silences that had paved the way for this moment. Finally, I found my voice. "This isn't just about Christmas," I said firmly. "This is about trust, about respect, about being honest with one another. If we can't have that, what do we have?" Jennifer wiped her tears away, nodding slowly. "You're right, Dad. We messed up. We wanted something different, but we didn't know how to ask for it." Michael added quietly, "We thought it would be easier to keep you out, but we see now it only made things worse." I looked at my children, the people I had raised and loved unconditionally, and felt a mixture of sadness and determination swell inside me. This lie, this Christmas betrayal, wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something that needed fixing. "I came here because I love Linda, and because I believed you," I said. "But now, we need to fix this, not just for the holidays, but for the years ahead. Tomorrow we're going to talk about everything, our family, the estate, our future. And I'm coming prepared. I have all the documents and records I need to make sure there are no more secrets." Their eyes widened slightly, and I could see the realization settling in. They were no longer in control. That day, Christmas Day, wasn't the joyful reunion I'd hoped for. Instead, it was a reckoning, a painful unveiling of truths long buried under the weight of the pride and silence. But as I stood there, amid the shadows of that cold old house, I knew one thing. No matter how painful, the truth was the only way forward, and I was ready to fight for it, for Linda, for my children, and for the family we all deserved to be. After that bitter Christmas morning confrontation, when the truth about their deception was finally laid bare, I knew things couldn't just go back to the way they were, not anymore. The house that had once felt like home had suddenly become a cold, unwelcoming place, a stage for old grievances and fractured trust. But beneath the disappointment and hurt, a fire began burning inside me, a fierce determination to take back control of the family estate and to protect my wife's legacy, no matter what. You see, for all those years, I had trusted my kids to handle the financial and legal details of the estate. I had always believed that when the time came, we would work together, openly and honestly, to care for the property and each other. But now, faced with their lies and the evident cracks in how things had been managed, I realized I had been naive. I had let things slide, assuming everything was fine, and that mistake nearly cost me everything. So, that afternoon, I went to the study, a room I barely used before, but now became my war room. It was cluttered with dusty old books, filing cabinets, and neglected paperwork. I cleared off the massive oak desk, setting the stage for what felt like an excavation into decades of family business. I pulled out every document I could find related to the estate: mortgage statements, property deeds, insurance papers, bank account ledgers, tax filings, utility bills, legal correspondence, you name it. The pile started small but quickly grew into mountains of paper. At first, I felt overwhelmed. The sheer volume of paperwork was staggering, but I couldn't let that stop me. I forced myself to slow down and take it one step at a time, methodically sorting the documents by category. Every paper told a story: payments made or missed, accounts opened or closed, legal decisions signed off, often without my knowledge or approval. It was like uncovering a secret world that had been operating behind my back. One of the first things that jumped out at me was the number of bank transfers and withdrawals from our joint accounts that I had never seen before. Some payments went to vendors I didn't recognize. Others were large sums moving around between accounts. Several bills were overdue or ignored entirely, including the property insurance, which had almost lapsed without anyone telling me. It was clear my children had been making decisions without consulting me, or worse, had been deliberately keeping me in the dark. But I didn't stop at just noticing problems. I began making detailed notes on every irregularity. I cross-checked dates, amounts, and recipients. I started creating spreadsheets and charts on my old laptop, mapping out how money had flowed through our accounts over the past several years. I was building a comprehensive picture of what was going on, who was responsible, and how far this neglect or mismanagement went. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a case of forgetfulness or oversight. There was a pattern here of exclusion, secrecy, and possibly even financial exploitation. I could feel the weight of betrayal settle deep in my chest. How could my own children do this? How had they thought it was okay to lie to me about Mom and then handle the family finances behind my back? But anger alone wouldn't solve anything. I knew that if I wanted to protect Linda and what she and I had built, I needed to be smart, prepared, and unshakable. So I spent hours at that desk, often late into the night, reading through every document and note. I made lists of questions I wanted to ask, issues that needed urgent fixing, and plans to restructure how things would be managed moving forward. I also began reaching out quietly to professionals I trusted, our longtime family attorney, an accountant friend I'd known for years, even a financial advisor who specialized in estate management. I didn't tell my children yet. I needed unbiased advice and an expert eye on the situation before making any moves. I sent scanned copies of some documents and waited anxiously for their feedback. Their responses were sobering, but helpful. They confirmed what I had suspected. The estate's finances were in disarray. There were missed tax deadlines that could lead to penalties, insurance gaps that put the property at risk, and unaccounted for expenses that raised red flags. My advisors stressed the importance of regaining legal control and ensuring proper oversight immediately. This new knowledge strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for money or paper. I was fighting for our family's name, for Linda's peace of mind, and for the future generations who would inherit this legacy. And above all, I was fighting to restore the trust that had been shattered that Christmas. When my children came home that evening, the house was thick with tension. They saw me sitting at that desk, surrounded by papers and notes, my face drawn but determined. Gone was the confused, weary father who'd arrived days before. Now, I was a man on a mission. I didn't waste time with small talk. I laid out the evidence before them, carefully but firmly, showing them the inconsistencies I'd found. I explained the risks we were facing, the legal responsibilities we had, and the urgency of setting things straight. At first, they tried to brush it off, to argue, to deflect blame, but I stood my ground. This isn't about pointing fingers, I told them, my voice steady but resolute. It's about taking responsibility, together, for Mom's sake, for all of us. I made it clear that, from this moment on, I would be involved in every decision, that there would be no more secrets, no more exclusions. We would set up clear processes, get professional help where needed, and most importantly, respect one another's roles in this family. The conversation was tough, filled with raised voices and tense pauses. But beneath the surface, I saw the beginnings of understanding, and even remorse. They realized that their actions had consequences, and that I was serious about stepping up, not stepping aside. That night, after they went to bed, I sat back down at the desk, exhausted but strangely hopeful. The road ahead would be long and complicated, but I was ready. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly fighting for my family, and maybe even winning. The days after I laid out my findings were some of the most challenging I've ever faced. It felt like the whole family had been caught in a storm, and now we were all struggling to find shelter, except this storm was brewing inside our own home. I'd spent weeks gathering evidence, organizing the facts, and seeking counsel. But now it was time for the hardest part. Confronting my children face to face, demanding accountability, and staking my claim to the responsibility I'd been too trusting to assert before. I called for a family meeting one cold evening, right there at the country house that had witnessed so much joy and, lately, so much heartbreak. I insisted that everyone be present, no exceptions. It was important to me that this wasn't some quiet, behind-closed-doors thing, but a full, honest conversation. When my kids arrived, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The room felt smaller than usual, the air heavy with unsaid words and uneasy glances. The holiday decorations still hung from the mantel, reminders of the Christmas we had lost to lies and silence. The last thing any of us wanted was more pain, but I knew that if we wanted healing, we had to start here. I cleared the dining room table and spread out the piles of documents I'd spent hours compiling: bank statements, insurance notices, legal papers, spreadsheets highlighting suspicious transfers. Each page was a piece of the story I was finally telling aloud, one that had been buried in secrecy for far too long. I began calmly, recounting the timeline of events and decisions that had been made without my knowledge. I pointed to the missed payments and unexplained charges, the insurance lapses and financial risks that had threatened our home and my wife's well-being. I spoke not with anger at first, but with a heavy disappointment that my own children had betrayed the trust I had given them. At first, they reacted defensively. Voices rose, accusations flew, and the old wounds of resentment and frustration surfaced. They tried to justify their actions, blaming misunderstandings, miscommunications, or their own pressures and stress. Some suggested I was overreacting or meddling where I shouldn't, but I didn't let the conversation spiral out of control. I listened carefully, acknowledging their frustrations but never losing sight of the facts. I reminded them gently but firmly that this wasn't a debate about blame. It was about responsibility, about doing right by Mom and preserving what mattered most, our family's future. I made it clear that from this point forward, I was reclaiming my rightful role in managing the estate. I wasn't interested in petty arguments or past mistakes. I wanted transparency, respect, and cooperation. I proposed a new plan: regular family meetings with a neutral third-party advisor, clear documentation for every financial decision, and joint oversight on all major estate matters. The room fell silent as I laid out these terms. I saw the mix of emotions in their faces: reluctance, acceptance, maybe even a glimmer of relief. For some, it was hard to admit they had crossed a line. For others, it was a chance to rebuild trust they had broken. We reached a standstill that night. No immediate resolution, but a commitment to move forward with honesty. I could tell it would take time for wounds to heal and relationships to mend. But the important thing was that we'd started the conversation, and I'd made it clear that the family legacy wouldn't be left in chaos any longer. As the meeting ended, I looked around at my children, not just as my kids anymore, but as partners in this shared responsibility. There was still much to do, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the path to something better. Not perfect, but real. That night, I went to bed exhausted, but resolute. I knew that standing up to my family was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but I also knew it was necessary, for Linda, for the house, for all of us. Tom and Linda worked together to fix up the country house, making it feel like home again. I took control of the family estate with honesty, involving everyone fairly. Slowly, the family began to heal, and Linda's smile returned. That tough Christmas became a fresh start for all of us, a new chapter of trust and togetherness.